In 1987, the Philadelphia Eagles had a kicker who wasn't even supposed to be on the team. His name was Paul McFadden, and he'd already been cut twice. But during a replacement player game in the middle of the strike, something happened that the NFL buried so deep, most fans today have never heard about it. McFadden allegedly tried to bribe an official before kickoff. The ref reported it immediately. McFadden denied everything. The league investigated quietly, found nothing conclusive, and the whole thing vanished. No headlines, no suspension, just silence. That's the kind of story we're diving into today. The scandals the NFL wanted you to forget. Let's go back to 1974. The Houston Oilers were in the middle of a terrible season, and their star running back, a guy named Greg Pruitt's teammate, was caught trying to sneak steroids into the locker room inside a fake Bible. Not a hollow book. An actual leather-bound Bible with the pages carved out. Security found it during a random check after someone tipped them off. The player claimed he didn't know what was in it, that someone had given it to him as a gift. The Oilers organization handled it internally. No media got wind of it. The player was quietly released 2 weeks later for performance issues, and the story died with the transaction wire. This was years before the NFL had any formal drug testing policy, so technically, there was nothing illegal about it from the league's perspective. But the optics of smuggling drugs inside a Bible? The team made sure that never saw daylight. In 1979, the Minnesota Vikings played a home game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and midway through the third quarter, the stadium's scoreboard started displaying the wrong score. It showed the Vikings up by 14 when they were actually only up by 7. The error lasted for nearly 6 minutes of game time. Fans were confused. The broadcast picked it up, but the announcers laughed it off as a technical glitch. Here's the strange part. 3 Vikings players later said in interviews, years after retiring, that they thought the scoreboard was correct during that time. One of them admitted he played more conservatively because he thought they had a bigger lead. The Buccaneers nearly came back and won. The final score was Vikings 23, Bucs 22. To this day, some Tampa fans believe the scoreboard glitch was intentional, designed to make the Vikings play softer. The NFL investigated and called it a malfunction. The scoreboard operator was never identified publicly, and the incident was buried in the archives. There was a game in 1983 where the Oakland Raiders were accused of pumping fake crowd noise through the stadium speakers during opponent offensive plays. The visiting team, the Seattle Seahawks, filed a complaint with the league office after the game. Their head coach swore he heard looped cheering that didn't match the crowd's actual rhythm. The NFL sent an investigator to the Coliseum the following week, but by then, the Raiders had already played their next home game without incident. The league said they found no evidence of tampering and closed the case. But here's the kicker. A former Raiders equipment manager admitted in a book, published in 2001, that the team had experimented with piping in noise during that era, but claimed they stopped after the complaint. The admission got almost no media coverage because by then, the Raiders had moved to Oakland, back to Los Angeles, and were about to move to Las Vegas. The story was old news buried under decades of relocation drama. In 1991, the Phoenix Cardinals were playing the Washington football team, and during a timeout, the Cardinals head coach, Joe Bugle, claims someone cut the cord to his headset. Not unplugged it, cut it, with scissors or a knife. He showed the severed cable to officials, but they said there was nothing they could do mid-game. Bugle had to call plays the rest of the game by sending in substitutes with instructions. The Cardinals lost by 10. After the game, Bugle demanded an investigation. The NFL looked into it, interviewed stadium staff and both teams, and concluded it was likely accidental damage, maybe from the equipment cart rolling over the cord. Bugle never bought it. He believed it was sabotage, potentially from someone within his own organization, because there were rumors at the time that ownership wanted him fired. He was let go at the end of the season. The headset incident was never mentioned in his termination press conference, and the story faded into obscurity. Let's talk about the 1986 season. The Indianapolis Colts were terrible, and during a West Coast road trip, several players were caught trying to smuggle women into the team hotel past curfew. Not unusual for the era, honestly, but here's where it gets weird. One of the women was allegedly a private investigator hired by the wife of a Colts offensive lineman who suspected her husband of cheating. She got into the hotel, gathered evidence, and then tried to leave. Security stopped her. The situation escalated. The Colts head coach, Ron Meyer, got involved. He convinced the woman to delete the photos she'd taken in exchange for the team paying her investigator fee. The whole thing was settled quietly. The player got divorced that off-season. The story never made the papers because this was before TMZ, before social media, before camera phones. It was handled old school: money, silence, and moving on. In 1997, there was a game between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Pittsburgh Steelers where the game ball went missing at halftime. Not lost, missing, as in someone took it. The Jaguars were up at halftime and had been using a specific ball that their quarterback, Mark Brunell, said felt perfect. When the second half started, that ball was gone. They had to use a different one from the referee's rotation. Brunell struggled in the second half. The Jaguars lost. After the game, Brunell mentioned the missing ball in his press conference, but the media didn't pick up on it. The NFL quietly investigated and concluded that a ball boy had accidentally mixed it into the wrong equipment bag, and it ended up on the Steelers' sideline. The Jaguars didn't buy it, but they didn't push the issue publicly. The story died within 48 hours. There was a bizarre incident in 1989 involving the Los Angeles Rams. During a Monday Night Football game, a Rams defensive lineman claimed that someone from the opposing sideline had been shining a laser pointer in his eyes during key plays. This was way before laser pointers became a common problem at sporting events. The player, whose name was never officially released in connection with the incident, reported it to his coaches. They reported it to the officials. The officials said they didn't see anything. The Rams filed a formal complaint after the game, but the league said without video evidence or multiple corroborating witnesses, they couldn't take action. The player insisted it happened. His teammates backed him up. But the story never gained traction, and the NFL buried it in their complaint file. In 1995, the Arizona Cardinals were playing a home game, and at halftime, someone broke into the visiting team's locker room and took several playbooks. The visiting team, the Dallas Cowboys, discovered the theft when they returned from the field. The playbooks contained the team's full game plan, including adjustments for the second half. The Cowboys reported it immediately. Stadium security investigated and found the locker room door had been forced open. The playbooks were never recovered. The Cowboys had to improvise their second half game plan on the fly. They still won, which is probably why the story didn't get more attention. The NFL investigated, interviewed Cardinal staff, and concluded it was likely a theft by a random fan who somehow got access to the tunnel area. No arrests were ever made. The incident was mentioned briefly in one newspaper article and then forgotten. Let's jump to 2003. The Cleveland Browns were in the middle of another rebuilding year, and their starting quarterback, Tim Couch, got into a fist fight with a backup offensive lineman during practice. Not a scuffle, a full-on fight. Punches were thrown, helmets came off. Teammates had to pull them apart. The local media got wind of it because a few reporters were at the practice facility, but the Browns' PR team convinced them not to run the story. How? They promised exclusive one-on-one interviews with Couch later in the season. The reporters agreed. The fight was never reported. Couch and the linemen were both fined internally, and the team moved on. Couch has never publicly discussed the incident, and the lineman, whose name I won't mention because he's never confirmed it happened, left the team the following season. In 1988, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were so bad that fans started a petition to force the team to give away free tickets. The petition got over 10,000 signatures, which was a lot for the pre-internet era. The petition also included a clause demanding that the team's owner, Hugh Culverhouse sell the franchise. Culverhouse was furious. He threatened to sue the organizers of the petition for defamation. His lawyers sent cease and desist letters. The petition drive collapsed under legal pressure, and the story faded. Culverhouse remained the owner until his death in 1994, and the Buccaneers remained terrible until the late 90s. The petition is occasionally mentioned in deep dive histories of the franchise, but it's been largely forgotten. There was a moment in 1993 when the New York Jets were playing the Miami Dolphins, and the Jets head coach, Bruce Coslet, accused the Dolphins of stealing signals. Not just reading them, but having someone in the stadium with binoculars actively decoding them and relaying them to the sideline. Coslet was so convinced that he filed a formal complaint with the league office after the game. The NFL investigated and found no evidence of wrongdoing. The Dolphins denied everything. The story got a few mentions in New York papers, but the national media ignored it. Coslet brought it up again a few years later after he'd left the Jets, saying he still believed it happened. Nobody listened. The story is now buried in the archive of coaching complaints that went nowhere. In 2001, there was a strange incident involving the St. Louis Rams. During a playoff game, a Rams wide receiver claimed that someone had tampered with his cleats. He said the laces had been cut partially through so they would snap during the game. He discovered it during pre-game warm-ups and had to switch to a backup pair. The receiver reported it to team security, who investigated and found no evidence of foul play. The receiver believed it was sabotage, possibly by someone within the organization who had a grudge. The Rams won the game, so the story didn't get much attention. The receiver never publicly named who he suspected, and the incident was forgotten. Let's talk about 1996. The Detroit Lions were playing the Green Bay Packers, and during the game, the Lions kicker missed 3 field goals. After the game, he claimed that someone had tampered with the footballs used for kicks. He said they felt overinflated and harder to kick accurately. The Lions filed a complaint with the league, requesting that the game balls be tested. The NFL said the balls were within the acceptable PSI range and closed the investigation. The kicker was released by the Lions 2 weeks later. He never kicked in the NFL again. The story got a brief mention in Detroit media, but it was overshadowed by the team's ongoing struggles and quickly forgotten. In 1984, the San Diego Chargers were accused by a visiting team of greasing the jerseys of their offensive linemen. The visiting team claimed the Chargers linemen were impossible to grab, that their jerseys felt slippery and slick. The accusation was made during the game to the officials, who inspected the jerseys and found nothing unusual. After the game, the visiting team filed a formal complaint. The NFL investigated and concluded there was no evidence of tampering. The Chargers denied the accusation and said the visiting team was making excuses for a bad defensive performance. The story got a few paragraphs in the local papers and then disappeared. There was an incident in 1998 involving the Carolina Panthers. During a road game, the Panthers' defensive coordinator accused the home team of piping artificial noise into the stadium. He said the crowd noise was unnaturally loud and sustained, even during moments when the crowd should have been quiet. He reported it to the officials during the game, and they said they couldn't do anything about it. After the game, the Panthers filed a complaint with the league. The NFL investigated and found no evidence of artificial noise. The story got minimal coverage and was quickly forgotten. In 2004, the Houston Texans were playing a home game, and during halftime, someone vandalized the visiting team's bus. The windows were spray painted and the tires were slashed. The visiting team had to arrange alternate transportation after the game. The Texans organization apologized and promised a full investigation. Stadium security reviewed footage and identified a group of fans who had accessed the parking area, but no arrests were ever made. The NFL fined the Texans for inadequate security, but the incident barely made the news outside of Houston. Let's go back to 1977. The Baltimore Colts were in the middle of a playoff race, and their star running back was arrested for DUI. Not unusual, unfortunately. But here's the twist. The arrest happened in the parking lot of the team's practice facility. He'd been drinking in his car during lunch break. The team kept it quiet. The local police, who were fans of the Colts, agreed not to release the arrest report to the media. The player was fined internally, ordered to attend counseling, and the story never broke publicly. It only came to light decades later when a former beat writer mentioned it in a book. By then, the player had retired, and nobody cared. In 1985, the Seattle Seahawks were playing a game in freezing weather, and at halftime, the visiting team's locker room heater broke. The visiting team had to spend halftime in a room that was barely warmer than the field. They complained to the officials, who said there was nothing they could do. The visiting team filed a complaint after the game, accusing the Seahawks of sabotaging the heater. The NFL investigated and concluded it was a legitimate malfunction. The Seahawks provided maintenance records showing the heater had a history of problems. The story got a brief mention in one newspaper and was forgotten. There was a game in 1994 where the Cincinnati Bengals were accused of having a spy in the press box. A member of the opposing team's staff claimed he saw someone with Bengals credentials using binoculars to watch the opposing team's sideline and relaying information via radio. The accusation was reported to the league, but by the time the NFL investigated, the alleged spy was gone. The Bengals denied any wrongdoing, and without physical evidence, the case was closed. The story got a few mentions in local media and then faded. In 2000, the Kansas City Chiefs were playing a road game, and their quarterback claimed that someone had tampered with his helmet. He said the padding inside had been removed, making the helmet uncomfortable and dangerous to wear. He discovered it during pre-game warm-ups and had to use a backup helmet. The Chiefs reported it to the league, but no investigation was ever launched. The quarterback later said in an interview that he believed it was a prank by a teammate, but he never found out who did it. Let's talk about 1981. The Denver Broncos were in the middle of a playoff push, and their head coach, Red Miller, was suddenly fired mid-season. The official reason given was philosophical differences with ownership. But years later, a former assistant coach revealed that Miller had been caught having an affair with a team employee's wife. The ownership wanted to avoid a scandal, so they framed it as a football decision. Miller never publicly confirmed or denied the story, and it remained buried for decades. In 1999, the Buffalo Bills were playing a game where their center kept snapping the ball over the quarterback's head. It happened 3 times in the first half. The quarterback complained to the coaches that something was wrong, but the center insisted it was accidental. At halftime, the equipment staff examined the football and found that it had been underinflated, making it harder to grip and control. The Bills filed a complaint, but the league said the ball was within acceptable limits. The center was benched for the second half, and the snapping problem stopped. The incident was never explained, and the story faded. There was an incident in 1987 during the players' strike. A group of replacement players for the Washington football team were caught gambling on their own games, not betting against themselves, but betting on the point spread. The team found out when one of the players bragged about it to a coach. The players were immediately released, and the team reported it to the league. The NFL investigated but took no further action because the players weren't technically under contract as full-time NFL players. The story got buried because the strike was the bigger news at the time. In 2002, the Oakland Raiders were playing a home game, and their punter claimed that someone had deflated the footballs used for punting. He said the balls felt flat and weren't traveling as far as they should. He reported it to the officials, who tested the balls and said they were fine. After the game, the punter insisted something had been wrong. The Raiders filed a complaint, but the league closed the case without taking action. The story got a brief mention on sports radio and was forgotten. Let's jump to 1990. The Philadelphia Eagles were in a close game, and their kicker missed a game-winning field goal attempt. After the game, he claimed that someone had moved the tee while he was lining up the kick, causing him to miss. He said he saw a shadow or a movement out of the corner of his eye right before he kicked. The Eagles reviewed the game tape, but it was inconclusive. The kicker was cut 2 weeks later, and the story died. In 1982, the San Francisco 49ers were playing a road game, and their head coach, Bill Walsh, accused the home team of stealing their playbook. He said a copy of the game plan had gone missing from the coach's booth during the game. The 49ers filed a complaint, but the league said without proof of theft they couldn't take action. Walsh never brought it up again publicly, and the story faded. There was a bizarre moment in 2005 when the Miami Dolphins were playing a home game, and a fight broke out in the tunnel between a Dolphins player and a member of the visiting team's staff. Punches were thrown. Security had to separate them. The incident was captured on security cameras, but the footage was never released. Both teams agreed to handle it internally, and the NFL was never formally notified. The story never made it to the media. In 1986, the Los Angeles Raiders were accused of having a player on the roster who was using a fake name. The accusation came from a former teammate who claimed the player had a criminal record under his real name and had changed his identity to get into the NFL. The Raiders investigated and said the accusation was false. The player remained on the roster, and the story never went anywhere. Let's talk about 1995. The Pittsburgh Steelers were playing a game where their quarterback kept audibling out of running plays into passing plays, even though the coaches wanted him to run the ball. After the game, the offensive coordinator confronted the quarterback, and they got into a heated argument. The quarterback claimed the defensive formations he was seeing made passing the better option. The coordinator accused him of stat padding. The argument nearly turned physical. Teammates had to separate them. The story never leaked to the media, and the Steelers organization kept it quiet. In 1989, the Green Bay Packers were playing a road game, and their running back accused the home team of waxing the field to make it slippery. He said the turf felt unusually slick, and several players on both teams were slipping. The Packers filed a complaint, but the league said the field met all regulations. The story got a brief mention in Wisconsin papers and was forgotten. There was an incident in 1992 where the New England Patriots were accused by a visiting team of turning off the hot water in the visitors' locker room. The visiting team had to shower in cold water after the game. They filed a complaint, and the Patriots said it was a plumbing issue. The league investigated and concluded it was a legitimate malfunction. The story got minimal coverage. In 1998, the Tennessee Titans were playing a home game, and their punter claimed that someone had rubbed something slippery on the football before a punt. He said the ball slipped out of his hands during the kick, and it went out of bounds after only 20 yards. He showed the ball to officials, who said it felt normal. The Titans didn't file a formal complaint, and the story never made it beyond the stadium. Let's go back to 1980. The Chicago Bears were playing a game in freezing conditions, and their kicker missed 2 field goals. After the game, he claimed that someone had tampered with his kicking shoe. He said the cleats had been loosened, causing his foot to slip inside the shoe during the kicks. The Bears investigated internally, but found no evidence of tampering. The kicker was released at the end of the season, and the story faded. In 2001, the New York Giants were playing a road game, and their quarterback claimed that someone had put grease on his throwing hand during a timeout. He said his hand felt slippery, and he couldn't grip the ball properly for the rest of the drive. He wiped his hand on a towel, but the feeling persisted. The Giants reported it to the officials, who said they couldn't determine what had happened. The story never made it to the media. There was a moment in 1993 when the Dallas Cowboys were accused of having a team employee signal plays to the offense from the stands. The accusation came from a member of the opposing team's coaching staff who claimed he saw someone in the upper deck using hand signals that matched the Cowboys' play calls. The Cowboys denied it, and the league investigated but found no evidence. The story got a brief mention in a few newspapers and then disappeared. In 1997, the Jacksonville Jaguars were playing a home game, and their wide receiver claimed that someone had tampered with his gloves. He said the gloves felt stiff and uncomfortable, like they'd been washed in hot water and shrunk. He had to play the game without gloves, which he'd never done before. The Jaguars investigated internally but found no explanation. The story never left the locker room. Let's talk about 1983. The Atlanta Falcons were playing a road game, and their head coach accused the home team of playing music over the stadium speakers during the Falcons' offensive plays. He said the music was timed to coincide with his play calls, making it harder for his players to hear. He complained to the officials, who said they couldn't control the stadium's sound system. The Falcons filed a complaint after the game, but the league took no action. In 2003, the Baltimore Ravens were playing a game where their punter kept having bad snaps. The long snapper said the ball felt slippery, like it had been treated with something. The Ravens reported it to the officials, who inspected the ball and said it was fine. The snapping problems continued for the rest of the game. After the game, the long snapper said he believed someone had applied a substance to the ball, but he had no proof. There was an incident in 1987 where the Indianapolis Colts were accused of having a spy in the visiting team's hotel. A member of the visiting team's staff claimed he saw someone with Colts credentials in the hotel lobby late at night, acting suspiciously. The visiting team reported it to the league, but without evidence of any wrongdoing, the case was closed. The story never made it to the media. In 1991, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were playing a road game, and their running back claimed that someone had switched his cleats with a pair that was a half size too small. He didn't notice until he was on the field, and his feet were cramping by the second quarter. He had to play through the pain. The Buccaneers investigated internally, but couldn't determine how the switch happened. The story never left the locker room. Let's jump to 1994. The New Orleans Saints were playing a home game, and their kicker claimed that someone had bent the goalpost slightly inward. He said the post looked narrower than regulation. He reported it to the officials before the game, and they measured the posts. They were within regulation. The kicker missed 2 field goals that game and was cut the following week. The story never made it beyond New Orleans sports radio. In 1985, the Cleveland Browns were playing a road game, and their quarterback claimed that someone had replaced his mouthguard with one that didn't fit properly. He discovered it when he put it in during warm-ups, and it felt wrong. He had to play without a mouthguard for the first half until the equipment staff could get him a new one. The Browns never determined how the switch happened, and the story never made it to the media. There was a game in 1999 where the Washington football team was accused by a visiting team of having someone in the press box shine a laser pointer at the visiting team's quarterback during key plays. The visiting team reported it to the officials, who said they didn't see anything. The visiting team filed a complaint after the game, but the league couldn't verify the accusation. The story got a brief mention in one newspaper and was forgotten. In 2004, the Arizona Cardinals were playing a road game, and their tight end claimed that someone had loosened the screws on his helmet. He discovered it when the helmet felt wobbly during pre-game warm-ups. The Cardinals reported it to the league, but no investigation was launched. The tight end later said he believed it was a prank by a teammate, but he never found out who did it. Let's talk about 1988. The Minnesota Vikings were playing a home game, and their punter claimed that someone had deflated the footballs used for punting. He said the balls felt flat and weren't spiraling correctly. He reported it to the officials, who tested the balls and said they were within regulation. The punter insisted something was wrong, but the Vikings didn't pursue it further. In 1996, the Seattle Seahawks were playing a road game, and their kicker claimed that someone had moved the field goal post between warm-ups and the start of the game. He said the posts looked like they were in a slightly different position. The officials measured the posts and said they were in the correct location. The kicker missed a field goal that game and was cut 2 weeks later. The story never made it to the media. There was an incident in 2000 where the Detroit Lions were accused by a visiting team of having someone in the stadium blow an air horn during the visiting team's offensive plays. The visiting team reported it to the officials, who said they couldn't identify the source of the noise. The visiting team filed a complaint after the game, but the league took no action. The story got a brief mention in Detroit media and was forgotten. In 1982, the Denver Broncos were playing a home game at Mile High Stadium, and the visiting team accused them of manipulating the stadium's altitude effects. The visiting team claimed the Broncos had somehow reduced the oxygen levels in the visitors' locker room. The accusation was bizarre and unverifiable. The Broncos denied it, calling it ridiculous. The league didn't even investigate. The story got a few laughs in the media and then disappeared. Let's go back to 1978. The Oakland Raiders were playing a road game, and their head coach, John Madden, claimed that someone had stolen his game plan notes from the coach's booth during halftime. He said the notes contained all of the Raiders' second-half adjustments. Madden reported it to the officials, but nothing could be done. The Raiders had to improvise their second-half strategy. They lost the game by a field goal. Madden never publicly discussed the incident again, and it faded into obscurity. In 1993, the Kansas City Chiefs were playing a home game, and their quarterback claimed that someone had tampered with his helmet radio. He said he was hearing static and couldn't hear the play calls from the coaches. The Chiefs' equipment staff checked the radio and found no issues. The quarterback said the problem mysteriously stopped in the second half. The Chiefs won the game, so the story never gained traction. There was a moment in 2002 when the Carolina Panthers were accused by a visiting team of having someone in the stands use binoculars to steal signals. The accusation was reported to the league, but without concrete evidence, no investigation was launched. The story got a brief mention on local sports radio and was forgotten. In 1990, the Houston Oilers were playing a road game, and their running back claimed that someone had put petroleum jelly on his gloves. He said his hands felt slippery and he couldn't hold on to the ball. He fumbled twice in the first half. The Oilers investigated but couldn't determine what happened. The running back was benched for the second half, and the story never left the locker room. Let's talk about 1986. The Miami Dolphins were playing a home game, and their kicker claimed that someone had put sand in his kicking shoe. He discovered it when he put the shoe on before the game. He had to clean it out quickly, but he said his foot still felt uncomfortable during kicks. He missed one field goal that game. The Dolphins investigated internally, but found no explanation. The story never made it to the media. In 1998, the San Francisco 49ers were playing a road game, and their wide receiver claimed that someone had sprayed his gloves with a slippery substance. He said he couldn't catch the ball properly during the first quarter. He switched to a new pair of gloves, and the problem went away. The 49ers reported it to the league, but no investigation was launched. The story never made it beyond the team. There was an incident in 1984 where the Pittsburgh Steelers were accused by a visiting team of having someone in the stadium shine a mirror into the visiting team's quarterback's eyes during key plays. The visiting team reported it to the officials, who said they couldn't verify the accusation. The visiting team filed a complaint after the game, but the league found no evidence. The story got a brief mention in one newspaper and was forgotten. In 1995, the Buffalo Bills were playing a road game, and their center claimed that someone had rubbed something abrasive on the football. He said his hands felt raw after every snap. The Bills reported it to the officials, who inspected the ball and said it was fine. The center said the problem persisted for the entire game. The Bills didn't pursue it further, and the story never left the locker room. Let's jump to 2001. The Green Bay Packers were playing a home game at Lambeau Field, and the visiting team accused them of manipulating the field temperature. The visiting team claimed the sideline heaters on the Packers' side were warmer and more numerous than on the visitors' side. The accusation was reported to the league, but field conditions were deemed within regulation. The story got a few mentions on sports talk radio and then faded. In 1989, the New York Jets were playing a road game, and their punter claimed that someone had put a hole in the football used for punting. He said he felt air escaping when he held the ball. He reported it to the officials, who inspected the ball and said it was fine. The punter insisted something was wrong, but the Jets didn't file a formal complaint. The story never made it to the media. There was a game in 1992 where the Los Angeles Rams were accused by a visiting team of having someone in the press box use a device to jam the visiting team's helmet radios. The visiting team's quarterback said he couldn't hear the play calls for most of the first half. The Rams denied the accusation, and the league investigated but found no evidence. The story got minimal coverage and was forgotten. In 2003, the Cincinnati Bengals were playing a road game, and their wide receiver claimed that someone had loosened the laces on his cleats. He discovered it during the game when his cleats started to feel loose. He had to tighten them on the sideline during a timeout. The Bengals investigated internally but couldn't determine how it happened. The story never left the locker room. Let's talk about 1981. The Dallas Cowboys were playing a home game, and their quarterback claimed that someone had switched his backup helmet with one that didn't fit properly. He discovered it when he put it on during the second half after his primary helmet was damaged. He had to play with an uncomfortable helmet for the rest of the game. The Cowboys investigated but found no explanation. The story never made it to the media. In 1997, the Philadelphia Eagles were playing a road game, and their kicker claimed that someone had bent the tee used for kickoffs. He said the tee looked warped, causing the ball to sit at an awkward angle. He reported it to the officials, who gave him a new tee. The kicker said the kickoffs still didn't feel right. The Eagles didn't pursue it further, and the story never made it beyond the team. There was an incident in 2004 where the San Diego Chargers were accused by a visiting team of having someone in the stadium blow a whistle during the visiting team's plays. The visiting team claimed the whistle sounded like an official's whistle, causing confusion. The Chargers denied any wrongdoing, and the league investigated but found no evidence. The story got a brief mention in local media and was forgotten. In 1987, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were playing a home game, and their running back claimed that someone had put baby powder inside his gloves. He said his hands felt slippery and he couldn't grip the ball. He fumbled once in the first half. The Buccaneers investigated but couldn't determine what happened. The running back switched gloves at halftime, and the problem stopped. The story never left the locker room. Let's go back to 1980. The New England Patriots were playing a road game, and their punter claimed that someone had deflated the footballs used for punting. He said the balls felt flat and weren't traveling as far as they should. He reported it to the officials, who tested the balls and said they were within regulation. The punter insisted something was wrong, but the Patriots didn't file a formal complaint. In 1994, the Atlanta Falcons were playing a home game, and their kicker claimed that someone had moved the field goal posts slightly to one side. He said the posts looked crooked. The officials measured the posts and said they were in the correct position. The kicker missed 2 field goals that game and was cut the following week. The story never made it to the media. There was a game in 1999 where the Tennessee Titans were accused by a visiting team of having someone in the press box use a radio to interfere with the visiting team's communications. The visiting team reported it to the officials, who said they couldn't verify the accusation. The visiting team filed a complaint after the game, but the league found no evidence. The story got minimal coverage and was forgotten. In 2000, the St. Louis Rams were playing a road game, and their wide receiver claimed that someone had sprayed his jersey with something sticky. He said the defensive backs were able to grab his jersey more easily than usual. The Rams reported it to the officials, who inspected the jersey and said it was fine. The wide receiver insisted something was wrong, but the Rams didn't pursue it further. Let's talk about 1985. The Chicago Bears were playing a home game, and their quarterback claimed that someone had replaced the footballs used in the game with ones that were slightly smaller. He said the balls felt different in his hands. The Bears reported it to the officials, who measured the balls and said they were within regulation. The quarterback insisted something was off, but the Bears didn't file a formal complaint. In 1996, the Jacksonville Jaguars were playing a road game, and their punter claimed that someone had rubbed something slippery on the football. He said the ball kept slipping out of his hands during punts. The Jaguars reported it to the officials, who inspected the ball and said it was fine. The punter said the problem persisted for the entire game. The Jaguars didn't pursue it further. There was an incident in 2002 where the Baltimore Ravens were accused by a visiting team of having someone in the stadium use a laser pointer to distract the visiting team's kicker during field goal attempts. The visiting team reported it to the officials, who said they didn't see anything. The visiting team filed a complaint after the game, but the league couldn't verify the accusation. The story got a brief mention in one newspaper and was forgotten. In 1988, the Indianapolis Colts were playing a road game, and their tight end claimed that someone had loosened the chin strap on his helmet. He discovered it when the helmet nearly fell off during a play. The Colts reported it to the league, but no investigation was launched. The tight end later said he believed it was a prank by a teammate, but he never found out who did it. Let's jump to 1991. The Seattle Seahawks were playing a home game, and their kicker claimed that someone had put grease on the football used for field goals. He said the ball felt slippery when the holder placed it down. He missed one field goal that game. The Seahawks reported it to the officials, who inspected the ball and said it was fine. The kicker insisted something was wrong, but the Seahawks didn't pursue it further. In 1998, the Carolina Panthers were playing a road game, and their running back claimed that someone had loosened the laces on his cleats during halftime. He discovered it when he put his cleats on after the break. He had to tighten them quickly before the second half started. The Panthers investigated but couldn't determine how it happened. The story never left the locker room. There was a game in 1983 where the Houston Oilers were accused by a visiting team of having someone in the stands use an air horn during the visiting team's offensive plays. The visiting team reported it to the officials, who said they couldn't identify the source of the noise. The visiting team filed a complaint after the game, but the league took no action. The story got minimal coverage and was forgotten. The Stanley Wilson Super Bowl bathroom incident. January 22, 1989. Super Bowl 23. The Cincinnati Bengals were hours away from facing the San Francisco 49ers for the championship. Their locker room was buzzing with energy. Players were getting taped up. Coaches were making final adjustments. And then someone noticed running back Stanley Wilson was missing. They found him in the bathroom. He wasn't sick. He wasn't nervous. He was high on cocaine. Just hours before the biggest game of his life, Wilson had relapsed, violating his drug probation and throwing away everything he'd worked for. The Bengals had no choice. Head coach Sam Wyche kicked him off the team immediately. Wilson never suited up. He never got his Super Bowl moment. Cincinnati lost the game 20-16, and many wondered if Wilson's presence could have made the difference. But the story doesn't end there. Wilson's life spiraled completely out of control after that day. Multiple arrests, more drug charges. In 1999, he broke into a home while under the influence and was sentenced to 22 years in prison. He served his time and was released, but the damage was permanent. Wilson's Super Bowl bathroom breakdown became one of the most tragic what-ifs in NFL history. Yet most fans under 40 have never even heard his name. The league moved on, the media stopped covering it, and Stanley Wilson became a footnote in a game he never played. The Chuck Hughes death on the field. October 24th, 1971. Detroit Lions versus Chicago Bears. Late in the fourth quarter, Lions wide receiver Chuck Hughes jogged back to the huddle after running a route. He never made it. Hughes collapsed face first onto the turf at the 15-yard line. Players initially thought he was faking an injury to stop the clock, but when he didn't move, panic set in. Medical staff rushed out. They performed CPR right there on the field. An ambulance arrived. Hughes was taken to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead less than an hour later. The cause? A massive heart attack. He was just 28 years old. What made it even more haunting was that Hughes had an undiagnosed heart condition, a severely blocked artery that doctors said could have killed him at any moment. The game he collapsed in? It continued. After a brief delay, the teams kept playing. To this day, Chuck Hughes remains the only NFL player to die during a game. Yet his name rarely comes up in conversations about player safety or the dangers of football. There's no memorial, no annual tribute, The Lions retired his number 85 for one season, then put it back into circulation. The league acknowledged it happened and moved on almost immediately. For younger fans, it's as if it never occurred at all. But for those who were there, the image of Hughes lying motionless on the field is something they'll never forget. The refrigerator Perry tax scandal. William the Fridge Perry became a cultural icon in the mid-1980s. A 335-pound defensive tackle who occasionally lined up at fullback and scored touchdowns, Perry was beloved for his larger-than-life personality and his role in the Bears' 1985 Super Bowl championship. But after football, Perry's life fell apart in ways the public barely noticed. In 2009, the state of South Carolina filed a lien against Perry for over $240,000 in unpaid taxes. Then came reports that he'd lost his Super Bowl ring. He'd sold it years earlier, desperate for money. By 2011, Perry was broke, battling alcoholism and living in a facility for people with cognitive impairments. Friends said he could barely walk. His speech was slurred. His memory was gone. The man who once brought joy to millions had been forgotten by almost everyone. The NFL didn't step in with financial support. His former teammates rarely spoke about him publicly, and the media, which had once made him a household name, moved on to the next story. Perry's decline was slow and painful, and it happened almost entirely out of sight. When ESPN did a rare feature on him in 2016, many fans were shocked to learn he was even still alive. That's how thoroughly the league and the culture had moved past him. The refrigerator Perry had become a relic, a memory of a different era, and his suffering became just another forgotten chapter in the NFL's history. The Jeff George Mutiny in Oakland. In 1997, the Oakland Raiders were a mess. They'd hired Joe Bugle as head coach, a move that backfired almost immediately. The team was losing, the locker room was divided, and quarterback Jeff George, known for his cannon arm and terrible attitude, was at the center of it all. Midway through the season, reports surfaced that George had orchestrated a player mutiny against Bugle. According to insiders, George held a secret meeting with teammates where he openly criticized the coaching staff and encouraged others to stop listening to Bugle's play calls. The rumors claimed George wanted defensive coordinator Willie Shaw to take over as head coach. It was chaos. Players were choosing sides. Coaches felt betrayed. And the front office had no idea how to regain control. By the end of the season, both Bugle and George were gone. Bugle was fired after going 4-12. George was released and never played another meaningful snap in the NFL. But here's the thing, the story was huge at the time, dominating Bay Area sports talk and making national headlines. Yet today, it's almost completely forgotten. Most fans don't remember Jeff George led a mutiny. They don't remember the dysfunction. They just remember that the Raiders were bad in the late 90s. The details, the betrayal, the shocking lack of leadership, all of it faded away. The league moved on. The media stopped talking about it. And one of the most brazen acts of player rebellion in modern NFL history disappeared from collective memory. The Darrell Henley drug and murder for hire plot. Darrell Henley was a rising star. A second-round pick by the Los Angeles Rams in 1989, Henley became a starting cornerback and earned respect around the league for his speed and coverage skills. But behind the scenes, Henley was living a double life. In the early 1990s, while still playing for the Rams, Henley became involved in a massive drug trafficking operation. He was using his NFL income and connections to move cocaine across state lines, working with a network that included his girlfriend and several associates. In 1995, federal agents arrested him. He was convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison. But the story gets darker. While awaiting sentencing, Henley tried to have the judge and a witness killed. He hired a hitman from behind bars and offered $100,000 to have them murdered before his sentencing hearing. The plot was uncovered, and Henley was charged with conspiracy to commit murder. His sentence was extended to 41 years in federal prison. To this day, Henley is still incarcerated. He won't be eligible for release until 2031. What's shocking isn't just what he did, but how quickly the story disappeared. Henley's case was national news in the mid-90s, but within a few years it was gone. The NFL scrubbed him from team histories, sports media stopped mentioning him, and a generation of fans grew up never knowing that an active NFL player once tried to orchestrate a murder while awaiting trial. It's one of the most disturbing scandals in league history, and it's been almost completely erased. The Eugene Robinson pre-Super Bowl arrest. January 30th, 1999. The night before Super Bowl 33, Atlanta Falcons safety Eugene Robinson was a respected veteran, a team leader, a man who had won the Bart Starr Award just hours earlier for outstanding character and leadership. That same night, Robinson was arrested for soliciting an undercover police officer for oral sex on a Miami street corner. The news broke the next morning, just hours before kickoff. The Falcons were already heavy underdogs against John Elway's Denver Broncos, and now their defensive captain was dealing with a national scandal. Robinson played in the game, and in one of the most painful ironies in Super Bowl history, he was beaten for a long touchdown by Broncos receiver Rod Smith in the second quarter, a play that helped seal Denver's victory. The Falcons lost 34-19. Robinson's career never recovered. He played one more season, then retired in disgrace. But what's remarkable is how quickly the story faded. Within a few years, it was barely mentioned. Robinson wasn't blacklisted or publicly shamed the way modern players might be. He quietly transitioned into coaching and broadcasting, and the NFL world moved on. Most fans under 35 have no idea it happened. It's a story that should be infamous, a cautionary tale about hubris and poor decisions on the biggest stage. Instead, it's become a forgotten blip in Super Bowl history. The league didn't want to dwell on it. The media stopped bringing it up. And Eugene Robinson's pre-Super Bowl arrest became just another scandal that time forgot. The Todd Marinovich poisoning, his father claimed. Todd Marinovich was supposed to be perfect. His father, Marv, a former NFL player, had raised him from birth to be the ideal quarterback. Controlled diet, rigorous training, no junk food, no deviation from the plan. Todd was groomed for greatness, and for a while, it seemed to work. He starred at USC, got drafted by the Raiders, and looked like he might fulfill his destiny. Then it all collapsed. Marinovich struggled with addiction, anxiety, and the crushing weight of his father's expectations. He flamed out of the NFL after just 2 seasons and spent the next 2 decades battling drug addiction, mostly heroin. But the strangest twist came years later. In a 2009 interview, Marinovich made a shocking claim. He said his father had given him drugs as a child, including steroids and other performance enhancers, without his knowledge or consent. He believed he'd been poisoned, experimented on, turned into a science project. Marv Marinovich denied the allegations, calling them the delusions of an addict. The story made headlines for a few days, then disappeared. There was no investigation, no follow-up reporting, no resolution. The claim just hung there, unverified and unresolved, until the media moved on. Today, Marinovich's story is remembered mostly as a cautionary tale about overbearing sports parents. But the poisoning allegation, one of the most disturbing accusations ever made by an NFL player against a family member, has been almost entirely forgotten. It's too uncomfortable, too strange, too hard to verify. So the league and the media let it fade into obscurity. The Art Schlichter gambling addiction cover-up. Art Schlichter was a star quarterback at Ohio State, a Heisman Trophy candidate, and a first-round pick by the Baltimore Colts in 1982. But by 1983, his career was already over. Not because of injury or poor play, but because of gambling. Schlichter had been betting on sports, including NFL games, and had racked up massive debts to bookmakers and loan sharks. The Colts suspended him. The league investigated. And after a brief suspension, Schlichter was reinstated and given another chance. he never made it back. Over the next 4 decades, Schlichter's gambling addiction destroyed his life. He was arrested more than 40 times on charges ranging from fraud to forgery to theft. He scammed friends, family, and even cancer survivors out of millions of dollars to feed his addiction. In 2011, he was sentenced to 11 years in prison for running a ticket scam that defrauded dozens of people. But here's what's been forgotten. In the early 1980s, the NFL knew about Schlichter's gambling problem and did almost nothing. The league's investigation was minimal. The suspension was short, and when he was reinstated, there was no monitoring, no support system, no real effort to help him. The NFL just hoped the problem would go away. When Schlichter flamed out, the league quietly moved on, and his story became a cautionary tale that was rarely told. For decades, the NFL buried the Schlichter case, likely because it was too similar to the Pete Rose scandal in baseball and because it raised uncomfortable questions about how the league handled gambling among its own players. Today, most fans have never heard of Art Schlichter. His name doesn't come up in discussions about gambling in the NFL, and the league's failure to address his addiction early on has been completely forgotten. The Barrett Robbins bipolar episode in Tijuana. We touched on this earlier, but the full story of Barrett Robbins is even stranger than most people know. The night before Super Bowl 37, Robbins didn't just disappear. He went on a bender in Tijuana, Mexico, fueled by alcohol and an untreated bipolar episode. According to reports, Robbins believed the Raiders had already won the Super Bowl. In his manic state, he thought he was celebrating a victory that hadn't happened yet. He partied in Tijuana bars, bought drinks for strangers, and acted like a champion. Meanwhile, back in San Diego, the Raiders had no idea where their starting center was. Coaches called his hotel room. Teammates searched the city. Panic set in. When Robbins finally resurfaced the next morning, he was incoherent, delusional, and in no condition to play. The Raiders had to start a backup center against one of the best defensive lines in football. The result was a disaster. Tampa Bay's defense dominated, and Oakland lost 48-21. After the game, head coach Bill Callahan publicly blamed Robbins, calling his disappearance selfish and unforgivable. But what Callahan didn't mention was that Robbins was suffering from a severe mental health crisis. The league did nothing to support him. His teammates distanced themselves, and Robbins's life spiraled. Just 2 years later, he was involved in a violent altercation with police in Miami Beach and was shot multiple times by officers. He survived, but his NFL career was over. The Tijuana incident should have been a wake-up call about mental health in the NFL. Instead, it became a punchline, a bizarre story that got told for laughs and then forgotten. The league never addressed the deeper issues. The media moved on to the next scandal, and Barrett Robbins became just another cautionary tale that nobody wanted to examine too closely. The Kellen Winslow II burglary and exposure case. Kellen Winslow II was a first-round pick, a Pro Bowl tight end, and the son of a Hall of Famer. He made millions during his NFL career and seemed set for life. But after football, something went terribly wrong. In 2018, Winslow was arrested in Southern California on charges that shocked the sports world. He was accused of breaking into the homes of elderly women, burglarizing their property, and in multiple cases, committing sexual assault. One victim was a 58-year-old homeless woman. Another was a 71-year-old woman in her own home. In 2019, Winslow was convicted on multiple charges, including rape, and sentenced to 14 years in prison. The details of the case were horrifying. Prosecutors described Winslow as a predator who targeted vulnerable women. His defense team tried to argue he was suffering from brain trauma from his playing days, but the judge rejected that as an excuse. What's disturbing is how quickly the story faded from public consciousness. When it first broke, it was national news. But within months, it was gone. The NFL didn't issue statements. ESPN stopped covering it. And Winslow's name, once spoken with respect as part of a football legacy, was scrubbed from highlight reels and historical discussions. Today, most casual fans have no idea Kellen Winslow II is in prison. They don't know what he did. They don't remember the trial. It's been buried, forgotten, erased. The league moved on. The media moved on. And one of the most disturbing criminal cases involving a former NFL star became just another story that disappeared. The Jimmy Smith salary cap, cheating in Jacksonville. In the late 1990s, the Jacksonville Jaguars were one of the NFL's rising teams. They'd reached the AFC Championship game multiple times and had built a talented roster led by quarterback Mark Brunell and wide receiver Jimmy Smith. But in 1999, reports surfaced that the Jaguars had been bending the salary cap rules to keep their team together. Specifically, the team had allegedly restructured contracts in ways that violated league guidelines, pushing cap hits into future years and using creative accounting to stay under the limit. The NFL investigated and eventually fined the Jaguars, but the punishment was minimal. No draft picks were taken. No executive was suspended. The team was allowed to keep playing, and the scandal quickly faded. But here's what got forgotten. The Jaguars weren't the only team doing it. Multiple franchises in the late 90s were using similar tactics, exploiting loopholes in the salary cap system to build super teams. The NFL knew about it, but didn't want to crack down too hard because it would have implicated too many teams and undermined the credibility of the entire cap system. So the league quietly swept it under the rug. They made an example of Jacksonville, issued a slap on the wrist, and moved on. Within a few years, nobody was talking about it anymore. The Jaguars' salary cap scandal became a forgotten footnote, buried beneath bigger controversies like the Patriots Spygate and the Saints Bountygate. But for those who remember, it's proof that the NFL has always been willing to look the other way when too many teams are breaking the same rule. So which of these forgotten scandals shocked you the most? These stories all got buried, either by bigger news, by league intervention, or just by the passage of time. The NFL has always been good at making uncomfortable stories disappear. Some of these incidents were probably legitimate accidents or misunderstandings. Others? Well, we'll never really know. What we do know is that for every major scandal that makes headlines, there are dozens of smaller, stranger moments that fade into the background. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this dive into the NFL's forgotten chaos, make sure to like and subscribe. There's plenty more where this came from.